You can start those and also. They have changed the microphone. You can now actually hear what I say. That's great. So why don't you have a seat? Good enough. You're not that many.
No, you will have to do.
Yeah. So there will be only one blue sheet today. Again, we are looking for scribes. Ludwig and well, Ari is presenting, so but maybe you can fill in, Ari. Good. Okay, so by Friday, I think you all know the IPR principles, so I'm not going to repeat them. But you can always go to this place and look them up. So this is the agenda we originally produced for today. And as Graf Moltke has said about 150 years ago, kein Plan überlebt den ersten Feindkontakt. So sorry about that. It's going to change a little bit.
I can be the JavaScript.
Okay.
Unless there is someone volunteering. Okay.
You are the note taker. Unless you can do all of that at the same time, but it's a little bit. It's better. Right. So we have a little bit spillover from Tuesday. We will talk about CNML, and the rest of the discussion probably is going to be a little bit compressed because we have some people who couldn't come to the meeting, so this will be a little bit faster. So the agenda changes are pretty much, we are going to talk about the pending proposal. It's not a pending proposal, it's a proposal for a pending response code, because Peter has to leave right after that. Then Michelle and Alex will talk about the work meeting they have had with IANA about the SID allocation. So maybe that there is a plan forming, and I think we have to be aware of that. And then we can go to OSCOAP, and we can do the actuator and the request tag discussion in the OSCOAP segment. And we will discuss the stateless proxy proposal in the open discussion segment. And Michael has also come up with some issues about PubSub, so we can discuss them under the working group items because we have space left there. So that's the plan. Anything else we need to fix on the agenda, Thomas?
Hi, Thomas Fossati. Have you already? Sorry, I've just come into the room. The SMS thing is on agenda. SMS.
Yeah,
transport.
That's in the transport part.
Right.
So this thing. Yeah.
Okay. So 12. I know it's unfair, but can we switch it to the beginning of the thing so that I can just share what I need to do before leaving?
Yeah. So Peter and you both have to go. So Peter came first. So.
Right.
And
Okay,
then,
sorry.
then you. Okay, Peter.
Okay, thank you for taking into account my reservation mistakes. So the motivation for this work is that we have this, we want to do bootstrapping. And in bootstrapping, we want to use the EST. And in the EST part, in the bootstrapping, there's a certain moment that we ask an a system, is this node really a node that should belong here? And that might be answered automatically, immediately, or it may be that one asks an operator and time goes on. So what we want is that there is a wait. And this kind of behavior is supported in HTTP with code 202. It does not exist in co-op, so we are proposing a 2.06. This looks, why don't you specify that in the draft? There is another draft which is called EELS, which is also proposed in ACE, and in that they do the same thing, but then using OSCOAP. And I also talked to one of my BACnet guys, friends, and he said, yeah, this will be very handy to have, but we have sometimes those long waits, and then we should say where the information is weighted. So that's the motivation for a separate draft. No one? Okay. Now, the details, I'm almost finished here. The pending response indicates that there is a response coming, and he tells you where to find it. And he tells you also something about the timing for wait so much time. He doesn't say yet in this draft, you should not wait longer than this, but okay, that I hope for comments from the working group to make that clear. Client has to retry with a GET request after the max age, and this can be done in conjunction with observe. Sounds okay. Is this interesting for this working group? I think it is, but you are the working group.
Ari Keränen, I think we need this for the PubSub broker. Something like this we've been discussing a need. If you have a topic but it doesn't have yet publications, something like this could be useful.
Good.
So let's figure out the details, but looks interesting.
Lovely. Please read the draft and comment. Yep, you as well. Okay.
Dave Robin, I would agree with this. I think this is very useful. Could you speak a little bit about the motivation for saying not only the answer is delayed, but that it's over there? Mm-hmm. This seems to be a twofer. We seem to be doing two different things. Mm-hmm. One is a redirection, which could happen at any time. Yeah. I mean, we could add that as a feature, mm-hmm. at any time. Or in this, I'm going to get back to you, but come back to me. Yeah. So I'm assuming that the redirection is optional.
For the moment, the redirectional is there and tells you on the server side where it is located. It does not tell you that you can't find it in Egypt, for example.
Okay, I didn't follow that.
Oh, sorry. It's in the
response.
In the response, there's a location, and the location is attached to the server side.
Right.
Okay, so having the location in a different site in Egypt, for example, it's not included in the draft. So if you wanted more flexibility in where the response is, please let us know.
I'm sorry, so the redirection redirects me to a different resource on the same device, or is it a full URI?
No, it's not a full URI at this moment.
Why would I redirect to a different resource path in the same device?
That might be handy if you do maintenance and you get several of those responses and you have a temp 1, a temp 2, a temp 3, a temp 5.
I see. Okay. Well, I was actually intrigued by the idea of relocation because theoretically you ask me, but my answer comes from my big brother over there who's going to support me in this answer.
Might be.
So, okay.
But it's not in.
Right.
Carsten Bobin from the floor microphone. So we already have 503 in CoAP, which is something that clients need to consider in their state machines. So this would be another way to indicate that the request should be retried. And I think we have to define what the difference is between them.
Okay.
And we also, I think, need to think about whether this isn't really more application specific here, instead of something that every CoAP client out there has to understand. So there are other ways of doing that. So I just want to say, let's discuss this a little bit. I don't want to do a discussion here.
We'll be very happy to discuss this. Yep. Great. Okay, thank you. So, That's it. I've been quick, not too much overspill for me. Thank you.
Okay, then let's go ahead to the transport thing. Too many slides, sorry about that. I have a go-to. I thought I might be faster this way, but of course I'm not. There we are. Okay, so this was my status slide on the SMS GPS document. So the original author Markus Becker, had changed jobs after working on this in the University of Bremen. And well, it has been picked up by lightweight M2M in a form. Right now, the lightweight M2M document is heavily under-specified. So it might be a good idea to actually finish this. And what we now have managed to get a new editor team out there. And Thomas, you wanted to say something about that?
Thomas Fossati. Yes, well, just to note that we want to help with this, whatever, right? So we will get in contact with the current pool of authors to see who's still there and you know, be co-authors or just provide the thing. For us, the thing that is important is exactly what you say. So the IOMA lightweight M2M thing, and so
yes.
And the fact that we need both Bear co-op and OS co-op and DTLS protected co-op. So we both need this DPP or the UDH thing that we specified in 7925. But you know, we figure out how to push these things into the draft. But
so there are new authors, new editors there. The main change that was done in this round was to retrieve the parts from an expired draft that were referenced. So the text from the CoAP draft was integrated, so it's not now a self-containing document. And I'm hearing you saying we want to finish this now.
yes,
That's good feedback. So is anybody else in this room interested in finishing the CoAP or SMS document? Two?
good.
Okay, I'm also interested. Yeah, so Carrie is interested. So Alex is interested. So people are slowly waking up. Okay, I think we do have critical mass for this. So I think we should now try to finish that.
Another thing to note is we want to make sure that, you know, if we have to register code points in Etsy, then we will help with that as well. So
yeah, so the main discussion that we were having was, the main open point is how do you actually identify an SMS as one that is carrying CoAP or carrying DTLS?
Yeah.
And
Marcus was proposing this TP PID, which makes sense for some kind of scenarios, and then we have the DTLS thing that needs the UDH. So we'll see.
yeah, so I think we can discuss this on list, but this is really just a minor item, but that it needs to be defined to get multiplexing going. Okay, so while we're at this thing, I can show the other slide as well. So there is also a document that we are not going to discuss here, the CoAP protocol negotiation document by Bill. He's not here this time, but he also thinks this should be revived. Given that we now have multiple transports, it's becoming interesting how to do this. So expect some activity for this on the way to Prague. And this will be used with SMS, but also with CoAP over TCP and WebSockets and so on. Okay, thank you, Thomas.
Hello everyone. So I'm now fully awake, so I can give you a short overview of what happened this Monday. So this is in the context of the whole work that we'll be having here around the COMI work. And on Monday we had a meeting with a lot of people from the NetMod working group, and it was announced on the mailing list. So it was very there was a lot of interest in the room, almost 20 people in a small room. And actually the thing is that the people, they realized, well, we at the core, we've been working at efficient ways of using Yang for IoT. And the people at NetMod, they've been looking for ways actually to have efficient, to improve efficiency of their data by using binary encoding of the Yang data. So you have these two things, and then at some point they say, well, you know, this matches pretty well together. So let's get around and let's discuss what we can do with it. So it was the first time that we all met, and it was a very lively discussion. And the outline is that everyone is pretty much converging to CBOR for the binary encoding. So that was a really great discovery from both sides. And a lot of the discussions were around, well, how do we using, what are the SIDs, right? And how are we going to be using them? So there are a lot of questions about the allocation policy, you know, how will this work eventually in a non-constraint environment, like when you're using them actually to improve your efficiency. And we get a very useful feedback, and actually we got the discussion started. So that's really interesting. A lot of interesting questions out there. So the first recommendation was that, you know, we should really specify that the SIDs are 64-bit. And they are 64-bit, but it's not like explicitly said there. And on the wire, we're actually, because it's CBOR encoded, it's very efficient. So it can be 1 byte, 3 bytes, 5 bytes, and so forth. And some other like minor questions that should be answered, that should be asked. And this leads me, so there was this meeting, like 1 hour meeting, I think it was, Karsten was there, 2 hours, well, 2 hours, but we didn't see the time go, so pretty, very intense discussions. So this is why we're with Michel, we're presenting like an update of the SID draft here, and a question to the working group if we can modify very slightly the contents of the draft as from the output of this meeting that happened on Monday. So the SID draft has it's like a very short draft, around 20 pages, and it has 4 items there, but for things that are treated, that are addressed. The first one is, well, what's a SID? Well, this way we'll say, okay, it's like a 64-bit integer. The second one is, how do you represent actually the SID file? So the mapping between the Yang items and, you know, all the Yang elements and the SID. So it's a JSON format, and maybe there are some minor things to adjust, but like generally it's pretty stable, and you have running code on this. And then there are 2 other policies that the 2 questions are like the SID file lifecycle, how does it happen exactly, and the allocation policies. How do you allocate exactly how it works? So it's always there right now in the draft. So the first 2 points are pretty stable, and there are some minor adjustments to make on the 3rd and 4th point. So this is a slightly adjustment. So in order to answer the 4th point, which is the allocation, we had discussions during the week with IANA representatives, and really go back and forth with them on how do we set up actually this registry. In case you have not done yet, I would really recommend you to read. There is an RFC on this. I forgot the number. It's very interesting to see how registries are actually created. So what we propose here is to keep the 2-tier system for registration of the SID numbers. And so the first tier, so we wanted actually to clarify the terminology. So because there are ranges, so we have the first tier that is dealing with mega ranges. So a mega range is actually containing 1 million SIDs. So this is like, it corresponds to the name. And so we have our 64-bit space, and we are going to be using like the first 100 million, and all the rest are reserved space. So this means that if anybody wants to touch in this space, they need to go through an RFC or go through some approval, like a heavy approval process of the IETF in order to be able to touch this space. Then the space that we have here, we subdivided in mega ranges of size of 1 million. And in order to allocate a range like 1 million seats to someone, there is an IANA expert review procedure. And these are the things that that must be supplied. And so you go to IANA, you ask for your mega range, and then you get allocated 1 million seats. So this is the first registry that is created. The second registry is then what do you do? So then, of course, you do like whatever you want with these seats, but we will put in, there is a policy that, you cannot just go and randomly do stuff with them. Like you should explain what you're going to be doing. The first 1 million of these seats are actually, there are some pretty important numbers over there. And also we want to have IANA, the IETF, the preemption and the ability to actually use these seats right from the start. So the first 1 million is right from the bat allocated to IETF. And so this is a second registry. These are two separate registries and they're created in the same time. And so in this first 1 million, like from the seats from 0 to 1,000 are reserved. So they are for IETF, so they are not reserved because reserved, this is a special word in the terminology of IANA. So they are with IETF review. So this means that we must have an RFC, or there must be an RFC, so that we specify how these first numbers will be used. They are very precious because they have a very compact CBOR representation. So we don't want to make this wrong, right? So we need to take some time and some experience, some feedback to know how to use them. Then we have the numbers from 1,000 to 60,000 that are for RFC. So whenever you get an RFC, you have the opportunity to put in your RFC. Well, here IANA must allocate numbers for this RFC, like a SIDS. And when the RFC is published, then you'll get your SIDS put in there in the document by IANA. And there is also a possibility to have pre-allocation of this. So now this is like a standard draft document or any RFC that is out there. Then we have experimental use from 60,000 to 100,000. So typically this is where you're going to be using this for your development cycle. And from 60,000 to 100,000, which is specification required. So you must provide some way that, there is this open specification and there must be an expert to say, yeah, that's working. Yes, Juan Carlos?
Juan Carlos Zuniga, do you want to take questions at the end or in the middle?
Go ahead, ask your question.
So Juan Carlos Zuniga, and on the experimental use, is that like a temporary allocation or are you expecting those to be permanent?
No, these they will be temporary. These are like just for development. You should only be, it's like 192.
But are they still polys by IANA or is that
no.
This is just like the equivalent of local space in the MAC address for IEEE?
It's really for your lab. It should never leave your lab.
So it's the equivalent of locally administered MAC addresses, let's say.
No, it's interrupt testing. Yeah, that would be a good test.
But they can conflict.
Yes.
There's no current.
Yeah, here there can be conflicts, and they can. So it's like you have your module, you develop, you run on your lab or something, and then
it's a range that is reserved, but it can conflict. There's no guarantee.
Exactly.
Dave Taylor. So on that point, the RFC, that's the guidelines for writing, IANA considerations that defines, IETF review, RFC required, specification required, and so on, does talk about experimental, and it actually references BCP 82, which is RFC 3692, and so it might be useful if you just cited that as an informative reference in your document when talking about experimental, so that people can actually find the answer to that question fairly easily. That's a good suggestion.
Okay, yeah, thanks very much. So actually, this was one of the things that we did.
I'm Dave Taylor, by the way.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. So these are actually terms that so in the current version, there are some slight like language things. So as you say, like IANA, they have like a strict definitions of what means what. And this is like an update that we would like to make to the draft, like to adjust pretty slightly the terminology so that, you know, it means what IANA people want to hear, right? They understand what we're talking about. So this way, right off the bat, we create these two registries and we can start using SIDS through the IANA process. So I'm skipping a couple of slides. And you can go on to the slides if you want to have some more detail, like there is detailed explanation of all the things that I presented now. So here is the question of that we would like to ask the working group is it okay for you to make these slight changes, like introduce the mega range as a term, readjust a little bit the sizes so that we have these really good chunks of 1 million SIDs that are allocated, because this is not in the draft there yet. And also, this is one of the inputs that we received from the from this meeting, is that we need to provide more examples of how the life cycle of a Yang file, how it will go. Like there are some use cases, like you develop your Yang, you request your SIDs, then you insert them, or you first request your SIDs, then you develop your Yang. You know, so there are a couple of use cases like this, and we would like to add examples that for each one of them, so that people can say, yeah, that this what I want to do fits there, or you know, okay, I want to do something and it's not there, so I would like an example, and you know, through this example we will probably see, okay, so there is a thing that we should add in the draft. So this is the thing that we would like to add to the draft as an appendix. And as a next step is we would like also to have a meeting at the next IETF with the same people or people from NetMod that are still interested. And probably create some kind of a mailing list or something, or a place of discussion, because it seems that like we have these two communities, like the communities of IoT and constrained devices, constrained networks, and the communities of Yang, like routers and stuff. And there seem to be this intersection point that starts to appear. So, you know, we need the expertise of both, and we don't want to create like just a binary representation of something that will not be applicable to constrained devices, nor do we want like completely to ignore the Yang community. So there is this intersection point that is starting to appear.
So Alex, if I may comment with a chat on, so in the discussion on Monday, one suggestion would be, if there really is so much interest in having a binary version of Yang, of Yang data, shouldn't this be done in the NetMod working group? And I vehemently protested against that. The NetMod people know what Yang is, but they don't know what constrained devices are. So we tried to take that work there, and it didn't work. So it should stay here. But that creates this tension that the actual Yang experts are over there in the NetMod working group. So we have to find out how to work with them. And if you look at this schedule, we have to work pretty fast to be done in December 2016. So I'm not even sure that we will have that much to discuss in Prague. So it has to be done between now and Prague, so we don't incur even more delay there than we have now. Oh, thank you.
So yeah, so that was also a desire that we have also with the people that are very implicated into this. So we want to deliver, and we consider that there are some minor adjustments, but all the principles, and when we agree on many of the base principles, so we would like to deliver possibly before the next IETF, and then see, like, meet and discuss all this. So if you agree with the proposed changes, we can just go ahead and like submit a new version, or like submit a proposed text so you can comment on the mailing list, and then just go ahead with normal process.
Yeah, so I think it's good to have a version of the SID document that reflects these discussions. So I would encourage the authors to actually do that. change. That doesn't mean that the working group has to agree before you submit the next version of the document. But then, of course, it would be a good time to actually look at it, because then we will want to do a cluster working group last call at some point in time.
Alexei Malikov, have you talked to IANA about this sub-allocation and how happy are they with this? I assume it sort of looks sensible, but I would like to have their feedback before we actually send the document to ASG and discover it there.
Yeah, so we talked several times during the week. So this is actually, we did several iterations. We simplified some things, and yeah, we clarified other things. And if we go ahead with a document and modify, then we'll send it also to them, so that they read it ahead of time and they say, "Oh, guys."
Okay, good job.
Thanks.
I have a question as well. On the part of automatic seat registration,
yeah.
Is that documented anywhere other than in the slides and the presentation?
So that's actually a very good question. Thanks, Jaime. So we actually would get this out of the draft. I mean, it's not in the draft there yet, because automatic registration is like there are a lot of caveats that are there, and if we try to solve them right here, this will actually slow the draft, and it can take like an eternity. So what we would like to do is go ahead with this draft. At least we have this standard way, this defined way of doing things, and then we create the first registry that we will create. That is like the second million actually. There we will, of course, through the IANA process. Then there we will integrate this in the policy, this automatic allocation. The goal being, we want to see, because we want to have a way for machines to automatically register these type of identifiers. But then we hit the problem of space exhaustion. You can just have a land grabbing, like a server going and just say, I want the whole million. So then you go. So this way we need to have these rate limitation mechanisms that are integrated in this. Yeah, we will try with this how it works. It is the second million actually. If we see that it doesn't work, well, we go back to the drawing board, and we at least we didn't spoil the whole space, right? But the important part is that we have the whole registry, and we have the thing working for all the RFCs and all the documents, all the public documents, where people can go and say, hey, by the way, I have my YANG file over there, or my public document over there, and I want to sit. So they can go through IANA. It will be pretty rapid, but it will not be automatized.
Thank you. Francesca. John, who wants to talk about that?
Yeah. How does this look? It's only one slide. Good. Yeah. So this is an introduction to both to the changes in OSCOAP, as well as an independent overview of the per packet overhead of different COAP security protocols. So I only have one slide. This will be quite shortly. If you want more detailed information, find it in the draft. The overhead for DTLS 102 is quite well known, and these are some typical sequence number. Some of the per packet overhead depends on the sequence number. DTLS has 29 bits overhead. DTLS 103 and TLS has quite 8 bytes less overhead. The overhead is still quite large. When you do compression, you can get it down quite significantly. And this is the generic header compression. Then you get typically 16 for a 1 byte sequence number. Let's see, and then you can see that you still get quite small overhead for TLS with the generic header compression. The compression is not as good, and that's because the static dictionary is basically a DTLS header. Could definitely achieve a little bit better compression, but that would require a different static. Then for comparison, I included another compression algorithm by Shahid Raza, which he said that he would submit again, which is static, which makes it different from the generic header compression. But the main goal with this table is to show how DTLS compares with the latest version of OSCOAP. This was a request from 6-ish to minimize the per packet overhead. That has been done in the latest version. And as you can see, the per packet overhead numbers for OSCOAP is now significantly smaller than DTLS, TLS, even when compression is used for that. And OSCOAP can accomplish this by using COSI, CBOR, and by being incorporated into COAP. COAP is the reason why the response can be significantly smaller than the request. But Francesca will go into all the details of OSCOAP unless somebody has any questions on the compression overhead.
As a chair, what do you think will be the disposition of this document?
I don't know. What does the working group wants to do? I don't know. The information is there. Do the working group want to do anything with it?
Well, to me, it sounds like useful information to have with OSCOAP. So moving it to an appendix there might be something. Of course, there's always a little danger that this then becomes contentious. But I still think it would be useful to maintain these numbers. And as OSCOAP changes, and maybe even DTLS 1.3 changes, it's useful to have these numbers updated.
Yeah. Mohit, I just wonder if this would be something useful for LWIG. Possibly, you could also present this in LWIG, especially since like LWIG is there for numbers and guidance.
Yeah, could probably present it next IETF in LWIG. Good suggestion. Yep.
Dave Taylor. So to Carson's question, what about maintaining it on a working group wiki, which could then be kept up to date as numbers might be reduced or added to if there is extensions or whatever. So that would at least allow it to be updated and still have an official location.
So that sounds like a request to set up a working group wiki, which we probably should be doing anyway.
Yeah.
Yes.
Isn't GitHub or that?
Yeah. So HTTP-BIS has demonstrated that you can use GitHub nicely for a working group landing page, and that's certainly something that we want to emulate here, and that would also allow us to attach a wiki to that landing page, and that might indeed be a good way to maintain that information.
Yeah, I can maintain the numbers if you put it somewhere. Yeah,
thank you.
Hello, yeah. So I presented this on Friday and Monday, yeah. Tuesday, and at the end of the session, so I went really fast. So maybe I should just stop at some slide that was really jumped, almost. The changes. So as John was saying, we did some changes to reduce memory usage and per packet overhead that were requested by people in 6-ish and also from other people. So in general, for packet overhead, we did some COSI object compression that is explained in appendix right now. So there are no sequence number in responses. This is a change. The sender ID is sent in the request instead of the context ID. This was a change that Jim suggested, and then MaxAge and Observer have special processing that is more detailed in the draft right now. And for memory usage reduction, that's we reduced the security context and we modified the way replay works. So we only have replay window and not sequence number that's included in the replay window now. Okay, so I think that unless we want to discuss more about the blockwise issue and the request tag and what do we do with that? Carsten, anybody? So, as I said, I think, yeah, okay.
So yesterday we had a BABOF on firmware update, and we briefly touched the issue of doing a blockwise transfer of new firmware in such a way that you actually get a rolling MAC. So for every new piece of data you get, you know it's still integrity protected, and you can act on it right away instead of having to wait to the end of the transfer. So that's at least a requirement, an objective that could come in here.
Yes, so I think that that needs to be fixed for SCOAP. So how do we do this? So do we have a, so Christian has submitted this draft, the request tag draft that Göran talked about on Tuesday. So either that stays separate draft that OSCOAP would reference, so a normative reference, or if that's included into OSCOAP, even though it's some parallel work, it's not valid. It shouldn't be there only for OSCOAP. Other work may reference it too later. Yes.
This is Matthias. Yeah, so for block 2, we need the E-tag, and there's recommendation to use it, that you know it's the same representation, and there's no equivalent because E-tag is something given by the server, so it's a good thing, and it would also help in other cases that are independent from OSCOAP. So yeah, I would do it as a separate.
So the only thing like to include that work, I think, was to not stop OSCOAP, because that would normative reference. So, and then, you know, it would take longer. And I guess that core would have one more draft too.
Well, we tend to have these we tend to have these small housekeeping drafts, so I don't know a way around that. Now, one thing that came up in hallway discussions is that this request tag obviously has to have a certain amount of entropy to it if you want to survive a reboot and things like that. And while you are doing that, you might also want to carry entropy in the repeat option or something that is similar, proposed by the actuator draft.
Yeah.
So one way to reduce the overhead of the whole thing would be to actually carry both pieces of entropy in the same option. So you would use the request tag to also indicate the freshness of the request.
So if I'm understanding, Carsten is suggesting to put these two extensions or new tools into one document.
Right. Whether in a separate document or in your document, we still can discuss, but
close together.
They should be close together because there may be some opportunity for optimization here. That's
yes.
significant.
Ludwig Seitz, also speaking as a co-author of the OSCOAP drafts, I'm a bit concerned that the document is growing and growing and growing, and I think
it's 40 pages now.
Wouldn't that be a good thing to put into a separate document? I mean, it's for blockwise, which is a separate draft. So I feel in order to attract people to read OSCOAP,
and also now that Carsten
it would
was
be nice to not grow it into a monster document. I don't know. I'm happy to be convinced otherwise, but I feel we might want to have another document for that.
Just about that, just the point, like Carsten was suggesting to put the numbers that John presented into a SCOAP, and I also have the same reaction as Ludwig, like the document is already very long, so if we can keep that separate. Jim?
No, just a second. We have Christian.
Christian.
Hello, I hope you hear me now. Okay, you
Yes.
do. I'd like to comment on the thing about entropy. The point of request tag, as it is phrased currently, is that we usually don't need to transfer anything in there at all. So there is no additional entropy, because the request tag is just a detail more to add to the existing connection. So as long as you stay, it's only valid from one endpoint to the server. And you usually don't need to transfer information there at all. So you can have it 0 byte or even absent. And if things get worse, you count up 1, 2, 3. But this shouldn't ideally transport entropy at all.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Jim Schutt. I see zero reason to put this in the co-op document. This is a blockwise issue, and there's actually even no reason for co-op to refer to it. It's a blockwise issue. So, I mean, I would just have that in a separate document for blockwise and go there.
We do want.
And I also want to reiterate that I need to talk to Carsten, but it's like I couldn't figure out why you would need entropy in here. I totally agree with Christian. It's like it's a unique counter on a particular link, and that's it.
Okay. We do want OSCOAP to support blockwise though. So we would, I mean, sure.
Carsten Bohren, again speaking from the floor. Yes, we should discuss this. But what I wanted to point out is that while the observe and blockwise extensions to CoAP are separate documents, that doesn't mean that any other extension of CoAP is viable in any way without supporting them. So I would strongly recommend that extensions to CoAP manage to deal with both observe and blockwise.
I mean, OSCOAP, we were planning to, again, I want to reiterate, we are planning to mandate the use of this and recommend the use of repeat option anyway. This is, I think, more discussion of where should that text be? Should that be separate, or should that be in OSCOAP? What's the best way to get that out?
This is Matthias again. For this request tag, I don't know if you should look at it very narrowly, that it's just part of the connection or something. So the E-tag is something to identify a representation, so that you also know that it's the same representation, that you can cache it, and so on. So there's actually quite a lot of mechanisms connected, and we at least should think about those when discussing the request tag.
Yes. I don't know if Christian wants to talk. He's the one.
Oh yeah. Those things that work for E-tag don't work that way for request tag, because this isn't a representation of a resource in general. It might be for put, but even there, the E-tag would have to be determined by the server. So this caching and general uniqueness doesn't work out for request tag anyway.
I just wanted to make sure that you really thought about this and thought about every angle, because it was like, nah, let's take a counter there and it just counts up. That's all we need for our small use case. That was just input.
Yeah, so I think there is work that needs to be done here. Mm-hmm. I think there should be, we should have a little bit more thinking about which documents result from this work. But the work doesn't seem like it's really hard. It should be possible to finish it in the same timeline as with the other OSCOAP work, independent of how many documents actually result from that. And I think that should be the objective here, and the objective, of course, should be that request tag actually is good enough to give you the security properties you need. So we cannot develop it completely independently. We need to understand what security properties OSCOAP needs and make sure they're in there.
Okay, thanks. Moving forward. Another document, Secure Group Communication for Co-op or Multicast OSCOAP. The motivation, so this was presented last IETF during the unofficial core meeting. So I think there are no recordings of that, but this is basically the same presentation with the updates. So the motivation for this work. So the group communication for co-op RFC, I quote, "In the future, to further mitigate the threats, security enhancement need to be developed at the IETF for group communications." And also we had some requests from core mailing list and also in person at as soon as IETF 95 to do this work. And also there is this the ACE draft that references OSCOAP to secure group communication, but it doesn't actually say how to do it. And this draft that I'm presenting here fills that gap and explain how OSCOAP is used for that. And it's also use case independent. So the main features of this draft, it explains how to use OSCOAP in group communication, supports multiple listeners and multiple broadcasters. It confidentially, it provides confidentiality, integrity, and replay protection. So it defines what shared key material is necessary to protect the communication within the group using the OSCOAP mechanisms. And it provides source authentication. So it uses digital signatures which are embedded in the COSI object. So in general, one thing to remember or understand from this is that it uses the same structure, constructs, and mechanisms than OSCOAP. This is a short picture to remind you what OSCOAP does. So secure end-to-end communication in presence of intermediaries. It binds the response to the co-op request and protects payload of co-op message, but also parts of header and options. And multicast OSCOAP does exactly the same thing, but for group communication. So it also adds some details, as I was saying before. So for example, the broadcaster needs to store its own public-private key pair, and the listeners need to store a public key of each broadcaster. Yeah, and also specifies things like recipient contexts that are used for verifying the multicast messages can be derived at runtime. So we have updated this draft, and to adapt it to OSCOAP, we have done some restructuring following some comments from last presentation. And we also have added a join profile for ACE. So how do the nodes get the keys? Following also comments from IETF 97. This slide is to just mention what are the differences with OSCOAP. So it defines new parameters that are not sent in the message as in OSCOAP. So it defines parameters that must be sent in the message, defines new parameters like transaction identifier, and adds asymmetric keys, and also adds counter signature in the COSI object. So yeah, and I also wanted to say that there is an implementation available based on Contiki and Erbium. Yeah. So, any questions?
So maybe just one observation from the ACE working group. I don't know that everybody was here, but there is an ACE proposal also from Francesca for an ACE profile for PubSub. And we looked a little bit more closely and found out it's actually an ACE profile for group communication. So I think something nice is developing here, that we get a suite of interrelated and interoperating documents that allow us to do group communication with CoAP, where group communication doesn't have to mean multicast. It may go through a PubSub broker or other information distributing entity. The point is we get end-to-end security for groups. And that's pretty good. Please watch this, please comment on this.
So we're always looking for more reviews or comments or feedback. So please, there is a GitHub and okay. If no comments, then I can move to the next document that Karsten put in the agenda, I think. So I just wanted to give a really brief update of this one. It's the requirements for CoAP end-to-end security, and it's interesting because this came up in the interim Think2Think RG meeting in Amsterdam. So we authors feel this draft is stable. We have planned to include some comments from Jim, and otherwise we don't really see other adding more content. But if you do have more content, if you have some feedback, please formulate this, because to include more things, we need, of course, clear requirements and clear the scenario that you would like to see in there. And we always welcome more reviews.
So looking at the document, I wonder whether the term requirements actually is a good way to describe what this document does. To me, it really is a security considerations document. I mean, it's phrased in terms of requirements, but really it means what do you have to make sure that you actually get right before you can have end-to-end security. And so I think it's actually way more useful than your garden variety requirements document that kind of becomes uninteresting and when you have the security in the way. So I'm wondering what would be a good way to further develop this document. So we could somehow try to merge it with a general security considerations document in the research group, or so who has read this document or a previous version of that? So a few people who are interested in security have. Because not everybody here is working on security. Six people approximately. So I think we have to work that out. But maybe thinking about the title would be the next step to make sure that we really don't fall into the requirements trap there.
We feel like this is a useful document, and it was very useful for us to put it down because it cleared many things that we needed to develop a solution. Yeah, so if Core wants to move forward with this. Thanks.
I'm Medica Kao. I just actually took a quick look at your draft for the first time. I'm actually a co-author of an IPv6 considerations document for IPv6 under the OPSEC. And so looking at it, because it's quite lengthy, right, it wouldn't really fit into a security requirement or consideration section in any other document, but it might be a separate document for security considerations.
Yeah, so we often, when we actually have to write the security considerations document for other documents, we often wonder what can go in there, and having documents that can be referenced, where you can point to specific sections and say this addresses this, that would be very useful.
Dave Taylor. I've only skimmed the draft and read parts of it, but I'll volunteer to be one of your reviewers.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anybody else who volunteers for giving a review? So who has already reviewed this document? Jim has? Okay, so we are getting some traction here. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
I think Marika volunteered as well in the back. It's already there.
Okay, so we are somewhere in our agenda, which is really confusing because we have kind of covered most of the items here. So the next one is CNML, and we should try to do this in about 15 minutes.
Okay, let's try to do this in 15 minutes. Quick update on what happened since last time. The few things we discussed in the previous meeting was the clipboard formats, so you can copy paste CNML packs in Mac and Windows environments. Just small registration in the media types. Fragment identifier support, that's one section that defines how you use fragment identifiers to select a CNML record in a pack. So it's nothing that you would send on the wire, but would be actually processed on the endpoint. Pretty simple thing that it's modeled after the CSV formats fragment identifiers. The small update in the EXI schema ID. So on the text, it was small clarifications, and now actually the compressed EXI version a few bytes smaller than it used to be, and a bunch of editorial fixes. Then there was a request to add more units. This discussion started around the RSSI, the receipt signal strength indicator, but it seems that it's more about that we need a new unit for power level, which was missing currently there. Then the question is, do we also want to have something for RSSI which does not have a unit? Because usually that RSSI, they are vendor specific. So our suggestion would be we add the dBW for power level, whatever power levels. Then the question is, do we also want to have something vendor specific? We already do have there a unit that tells it's a fraction, so you can whatever 0 to 100%. Of course, do we need something more for the RSSI case? Or does anyone care? We can also do this later. The question is, do we want to have this in base spec?
Gary Lynn, so if it's vendor specific, I mean, how would it be used without knowing the vendor of the device that's sending it?
Exactly.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, so you would need out-of-band information, some other context information. So that is the question, how much use there is for that. Okay. So I guess we'll add, okay. So if no one objects, we'll add the first one. That's kind of obvious. It was just missing in the unit table. But the second one.
Yeah, maybe I can also relay that Cullen, who is one of the co-authors here and who has to be in another meeting, indicated to me he doesn't want to add something RSSI specific at this point in time because we can do it later and we can do it right then.
Yep. Okay, so we'll leave the second one for later. Perfect. Then this issue was already discussed in the previous IETF meeting, and then Christian Groves wrote even a long draft about the issue. So the thing is, currently, if you want to extend CNML, you can put their new attributes, CNML tags, because all of those are ignored, so you won't be breaking existing implementations. However, there are cases where you actually need to understand the extension in order for the whole pack to make sense. And one example of this would be the BTO that Christian was proposing. So the base time offset telling what is the time difference between each pack. If you don't understand this option, you would think all the CNML records are at the same time, which of course wouldn't be the case. So Christian wrote a long draft about this, looking into different possibilities, how to address the issue. Actually, Christian's draft ended up proposing media type parameters for this. I did discuss this with a bunch of you guys here on this meeting, and I got a lot of pushback for the media type parameters. It seems that they are not widely supported and didn't seem like the right thing to use that space. And also there was an issue, what happens if that CNML pack is actually not transported over HTTP or COA that supports media types, for example, it's on a file or even a database that doesn't indicate the media type, you would actually lose that information. So alternative suggestion, which actually was number 3 in Christian's draft, was that we select a character that indicates that a new tag must understand. And then we could spend more than 15 minutes discussing what is the character and where to put it. Sorry? Yeah. So let's say we would suggest, okay, let's put underscore to the end of such option. The benefit of this would be that, okay, probably underscore is not used by any right now. It is clearly a different kind of character, but it's not too special. So many of the systems where you would be dumping SendMail probably would not barf if they see underscore. And also, if you would start with underscore, that maybe would have more special meaning than ending with it. So seems roughly safe choice to use that. Okay, I see people nodding. I see no one running for the mic, so we're gonna do a pull request on that. And if you think it's a really bad idea, please do let us know. But for now, it seems like the sensible way to go forward. Okay, excellent. Maybe we will be actually done in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Because we want to really get done with this. Yeah, this the whole SendML is way overdue. We on our really last call. It's been used by other organizations and etc. And we are really want to get this done. So question is there anything else for the base specification? Of course, there are already plans for a bunch of extensions. For example, Christian has one. Maybe Christian, you want to say something about it right away? Christian's on the line. You want to hit the button?
Hello. But I'm not so much about extensions here, but needed for the base spec. As I understand things, what core interfaces is currently doing will not work with the specification with respect to how names are interpreted. And I'd very much like the link format authors to review that thing, because I think this is something that will limit the usability for SendML.
So this is related to the email thread that you posted on the H tag, right?
Yes, basically it's still the name versus URI thing, and currently this doesn't work with the base spec, or maybe it can be made to work. But I think that the link format people should collectively look through this again before we cement names that we can't later use.
Okay, so link format guys, please have a look at the issue. So the key of that is then how we form the names from the base name is that there is now the semantics is concatenation. You take the base name, you take a name, put them together, that's it. The other option would be to use URI semantics there, but that is quite a bit more complex than just concatenation, and that would be, let's say, a relatively big change on how do we do the names. So there, Christian has a draft, and no, is there a draft or is just an email thread right now that suggests to use also the href?
Right now it's only an email thread.
Okay, so actually maybe it would make sense to post that as a draft too, because I think you had quite a lot of good text on that, easier to reference. But the key question is now, do we need to change something in the base spec on that? I think that makes sense to have a separate tag or attribute that has the URI semantics, but I would be cautious against changing the semantics of the name. But as Christian said, please, links guys, have a look at this draft, see what is the issue. Can we do something about it? Or do we go forward with what we have right now? But please do it as soon as possible, because we really want to start last call on this. Okay, and then final issue. We currently use the +EXI in the media types. That could be an issue eventually.
It doesn't exist, so we cannot use it, and we have to fix that.
So, AD guidance.
Yeah, so there is a draft on registering EXI suffix on which Ned commented, and I started commenting. And then I finally decided to read W3C spec of XE and to figure out what the restrictions are. And well, I think effectively suffix registration draft has to be done first, or it has to be a normative reference or whatever.
So my view is that we won't finish the XE suffix registration in time for cinema. It takes more work to define the fine points there.
Okay, well, the question is, do you mind if the document is, being held in the publication in RFC editors queue?
Yes, that's good.
Yeah, that would be an issue. Of course, question is how long, but preferably not.
Well, Karsten is one of the editors on EXI documents. So if you're upset with him, talk to him. I think I probably will be okay with sponsoring EXI suffix document, but I need to figure out whether it's actually a good idea in the first place. So, yeah, I think my opinion is more well-informed than it was before the meeting, as I read W3C documents. So I'll try to send some emails on this.
So for those who are wondering what we're talking about, the structured syntax suffixes plus XC and plus XML and so on are meant to allow processing of a document, even if you don't know the specific media type, but only understand the suffix. And that works well for JSON, for CBOR, and so on. But XC is often transported in a schema-dependent way, so you have to have the schema to do that. Now, on the other hand, XC has a schema ID in the header, and you can use that schema ID to find that information. So
yes,
there's
but if it's transferred, and you don't know the schema ID, then you cannot do anything with it. So
yeah,
then you can, well.
There is a fine line there that would have to be drawn.
Yes, and the separate thing, well, maybe I'll talk with people who are interested. I'm trying to figure out whether schema ID is actually in use much and what exactly it means. And I've heard several uses of it, but if there are more uses of it, I would like to know, because it makes the situation worse. It's much better if it's actually disallowed for the suffix, but I don't know whether it's practical.
So the other observation is that structured syntax suffixes don't really mean very much for co-op, because you are only seeing the content format number, so you're not even seeing it.
Exactly.
So we might as well just, well, first of all, XE is kind of a weird case. Second of all, the structured syntax doesn't bring us much. So we might as well just go to minus XE instead of plus XE and take this one.
Well, in this case, the situation will, your draft just goes away, or is rephrased to, help more like, don't register the suffix, just have instructions, or, some informative language, how to implement this potentially. Yeah, and then it will make it much easier. Yeah.
So switch the plus to minus and be done with it?
That would be the easiest solution, yes.
I think so.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm happy to have a separate discussion on whether plus suffix is actually a good idea in general.
So I have some other documents that would need that. So they are not yet available, but so we will stay on the plus XE thing. We will try to discuss this, but we should not make this document be dependent on that discussion.
Okay.
Okay, so for this document, we go for minus EXI, and plus EXI will continue elsewhere.
Yes.
That works for me, as long as we get this done.
And speaking of your document now, I have reviewed it in September, because the milestone said it will be done in September. So
which year?
2016.
2016. So yeah, get it done.
Yes.
There it is. Okay. So I think we can skip the slides on how to do the media type parameters and so on, and move forward to PubSub. No. Yeah. Michael, why don't you come up?
That was my knee. Yes.
Where's the clicker?
Okay, update on the PubSub draft. We removed, basically we've gone through and we had this idea of REST function sets and profiles and a bunch of stuff that was in some early drafts that no one ever really used and never really went anywhere. So we're going through the drafts that we have and removing that language and just referring to them as, you know, APIs or something else. Maybe we can even think of a better word than API, but the one thing we did was removed all of that and we're just calling these, you know, REST interfaces basically to not have people think there's more than there than there is. We had a request to add post operation for publishing in addition to put, and added that. Also added tentatively put for create and publish. These were discussed at the Berlin meeting, or they were brought up in the working group, and I don't know how much discussion we had, but there's stuff there in the draft now that people should look at, and we should have some more discussion now that the sort of straw man stuff in the group. And then we did a lot of cleanup based on some comments and feedback that we got. There's some issues. Since we're now on the core GitHub, we have issue tracking, and all these issues are being tracked on the GitHub issues. Should discovery be mandatory? Currently, it says you have to support discovery of topics. Should create and remove topic be mandatory? And basically, there might be some lightweight implementations of PubSub that don't need to support all this, that have pre-configured topics and are configured through a configuration tool. And of course, the issue is that's sort of a little bit of a limit to interoperability in some cases, but it may not be such a big deal. So there's issues, and then of course these are being tracked, so we can discuss them all on the mailing list. We had defined 2.204 no content, but 204 is already changed on updates, so it doesn't seem like a good idea to use the same code for one thing on fetch and a different thing on update. So we'd like to go to 206, and then this other thing about 206 pending. Well, that's really what we want. We want to return a response that says the topic exists, but the data you have either not been published or are not valid, have been expired, because there's this concept of data lifetime in PubSub. So we'll probably work with the author of that other thing and come up with a good proposal for a new co-op response code that indicates that the resource exists, but the data are not valid. Right. The post on create, of course, using post, we thought, well, we'll create a list of stored representations, and then we can gain some reliability. If you can't if you can't notify as fast as things are being published, you could have a list there that would allow you to sort of catch up and notify. But that's sort of internal behavior, and we have a different idea there too. And then OS co-op profile, the group. You know, the idea of having a group profile that works for both PubSub and multicast is good, but we have this brokerless case where you can just do publish and subscribe between two nodes, where one of the nodes sort of has a built-in broker, if you will. And so we want an OS co-op profile. We want to see if a special profile might be needed for that case. And I don't know, I haven't looked at the question yet that much, but okay. Then this is the last thing. I don't really want to enter a discussion, but there's this idea of there is a way to increase the reliability of notifications that looks pretty good, and that is to have subscribers create a list for just that subscriber. So I'm a subscriber, I want reliable notification, I might want to be behind a NAT, I might want to sleep, it's part of the use case. And the idea is that things are published to that list, and then I can go back later and retrieve them or observe them. And then the last thing there is Sometimes reliability will be improved by having a different pattern than observed for getting notifications. If I want notifications pushed to me, I should be able to configure a web callback address. In other words, a URI that the pub sub broker uses to publish to me, to push notifications to me. And that whole thing could be added to PubSub as a reliability enhancement. We also thought maybe if we wanted to move PubSub ahead and not do that, it could be a separate draft, a reliable subscription using core PubSub or something like that. That's all I have. Any questions?
Okay, so thank you for that update. This is a working group draft, and it would be good to get more reviews just to get a quick indication. Who has read a recent version of this document? Okay, that's about 10. Thank you.
May I ask actually which version? Or the latest version? Could you raise your hand? The last one, the latest version. Right.
Okay, we have about 9 minutes left. Malisha, are you on there? Can you go to the queue?
Hello, hi, can you hear me?
Hello. Yes.
Okay, great.
Your first slide is showing.
Yeah, so hi everyone, my name is Malisha Vucinic. I am active in the 6-ish working group where we work on bootstrapping security protocols. Next slide, please.
You're breaking up.
So
turn off your camera so we can at least hear you.
Yes, I stopped my video. Is it better now?
Much better.
Okay, great. Yeah, so as I said, we work in 6-ish on secure enrollment protocol for 6-ish networks, and we are using CoAP as the transport protocol there. That said, we used CoAP proxy functionality as a way to get the messages between a new joining node that has only link local connectivity and the JRC that is multiple hops away. While working on that,
Alicia, we can't really hear you. So can you do anything on your side to fix the audio?
No, I only have wireless. Can I reconnect?
Ah, okay, so Meet Echo is already trying to fix it. So Malisha, if you don't mind, I'm going to karaoke to your slides for a minute. So we use the last 7 minutes we have. So the basic idea is that we have a very constrained node acting as a proxy, as a CoAP proxy. And the other thing is, this is a node trying to join. So we don't really have that much, I don't really know very much about the client. So any client could come in and do a request that is then proxied. And the problem is it creates state in the proxy. So you have a token, you have a UDP port, you have an IPv6 address to be able to send the response back to the original client. So we are building in a nice DOS vector to the registration system here. And the idea is to have a CoAP option that could be used between the proxy and the server, where the proxy essentially ships all that state it would create locally to the server, only to have the server send it back to the proxy when the response comes, so the proxy can act on it immediately. So it never has to store the information, it just hands it around. This does require a little bit more communication, but it does relieve the proxy of actually adding state. And by the way, a proxy could have 5 slots, and when the 5 slots are full, it could start using this option. So you don't always have to use it. It's just something you can use when you're in a DOS or otherwise overloaded situation. So that, of course, Dave?
The question on the slide that you just, if you go back one slide. I noticed the R column is empty. Does that mean that this is designed for, or limited to cases where there's exactly one proxy in between that is not interesting to ever have a case where there's two proxies, is what I'm gathering, because the R is not allowed?
But that's a very good question. So I think this should be noted down as something to consider. So in the 6-ish case, actually, yes, there is only one additional hop, application layer hop, but if we want to make this more generally applicable, it's worth considering.
Right, and this is Dave Taylor, by the way. And so if we wanted to, then you'd want to do something like allow it to be repeatable and have the order be important, that you'd always like add to the beginning and strip off the beginning or something like that in the response. So
great, thank you, good point. So this option obviously has security properties. So we need integrity here, we need freshness, we may need confidentiality. So some work is required for the proxy to do this. Yeah, I don't know the details of the proposal off the top of my head. Malisha, can you talk again? No, he's not in queue. Okay. Okay, I think we completely lost him. But I hope that the basic idea has come over here, and I think that's an interesting proposal. It's always good if you don't have to keep state. Alex?
Alexander, a short question here. So this basically says, hello, the server, take this state for me and give it back to me on your response. So can we have it like a more generic one? So not specifically for this join, but just say, okay, this is the state, give it back to me.
Well, we already have something like that. It's called the token.
Yeah, the token, yeah.
But that's limited to 8 bytes. So 8 bytes might be a little bit too little. Yeah. Malisha, can you try to speak again? Okay. So I think the mission for this segment is achieved. People know about this, and I think it's a good idea to look at how general we want to make this. Of course, this is then becoming a DOS vector for the server. So we have to think carefully about that. But who has read this draft? I mean, it's not even a core draft, I think. Okay, good. So we have made people aware of that. And I think we are at the end of the agenda, only having 1.5 minutes left. So my last slide is see you at the interrupts. So it looks like we will do something in the second week of May. That's where we are converging, but we will set up a doodle at some point. And see you in Prague. I'm leaving in 3 minutes. Yes. My flight is at 8, and you never know.